It's actually our very first lunch talk, so I'm thrilled to be with you and to share with you this fun topic of what motivates a child. So uh, I just want to share that, I'm speaking to you from Bloom KKCA Academy, which is a new school we are opening in Hong Kong. So just in case you haven't heard of us, be happy to share more with you later on our school. And I also invite you to please uh, write in the chat any questions, any comments you have, and I'd be very happy to take more of your questions as we go. By way of introduction, my name is Min. I am the head of admissions and executive director at Bloom. I graduated from Yale with a degree in psychology and also did the Yale teacher preparation program. I have a doctorate from Hong Kong U on motivation. So a lot of what I am going to share with you today is from my research for my doctorate. I I mean, that is exactly the perfect sound to start our talk today, because that's what you're dealing with at home. I taught fifth grade math and science in LA and English literature and writing at CU, as well as at the Hong Kong Academy for Gifted Education. I will share with you not just the research on motivation, but insights from the classroom as well. So let me just get started. And we'll start with the research, and then we'll go to the insights from the classroom. And, what the research says about students' academic performance or performance in general across different domains is that it really starts with motivation. And my doctorate was looking at language motivation in particular, students' desire to learn a second language. And though that was a specific domain, this really cuts across all domains of learning. And what you see in this research is that there are two major factors affecting student performance. One is aptitude, the other is motivation. And, I've never been interested in aptitude because that's what you're born with, right? Aptitude is your innate ability. So if that's what you're born with, there's not much we can do there, right? As parents or as teachers. So I've always been much more interested in students' motivation, because there we as parents and teachers have more influence over. So there are three ways in which parents normally motivate their children. One is power assertion, right? I'm the parent, you're the child, you must do what I say. Like it or not, this is how most parents will motivate you. This is how most parents motivate their kids, right? To do something that they want their kid to do. It's, I am the parent, I have the power over you, you must do what I say. Second is love withdrawal. So this sounds a little bit sad, but sometimes this is how parents, out of frustration, often will use to get their kids to stop doing what they don't want their kids to be doing, right? To be a bit cold and maybe to even not speak to the child. This happens often more when they are older. So, and then the third one is value induction. Value induction means how you are using different reasons and argumentation to induct certain values in your child. So explaining to your child basically, okay, you shouldn't do this because, or you should do this because. And that, of course, I think it's obvious that value induction is the most effective way of motivating your child, right? It doesn't mean that you can never assert your power. Of course, there are times when you need to, assert your authority. But I would never withdraw love, I think that no matter how poorly your child may be behaving or how unmotivated your child may be, I don't think it's fair to withdraw love. And I don't think it's healthy to ever withdraw love. So I would use power assertion um, at strategic times, but as much as possible, I would use value induction. So there is this research on self-discrepancy theory when that says we are most motivated as kids or even as adults when we see the gap between our actual self, where we are now, and our ideal self. Let's say my ideal self is to be a world badminton champion. I play badminton, but I know very, very far from this ideal self. Um, then I'm motivated to reach this ideal self, to attain this ideal self. And I see the distance between where I am and this ideal self. And that's the force, that's the push towards that ideal self. So that is from the research, from all the research that I've read, this is the best way to motivate your child is to help them create an ideal self that you think is healthy. And then that is going to naturally motivate them to attain this ideal self. The second and third self discrepancies are your ought to self and your feared self. Your ought to is like, okay, I ought to do this because this is what my parents say I need to do. And there is a discrepancy between where I am, my actual self, and my ought to self. So the motivating factor is this gap between where I am and where I ought to be based on what my parents or society tell me. This is motivating, but it's not as motivating as your ideal self. The feared self is so this comes later in the research where we talk about how you're motivated by fear of not meeting a deadline or fear of some kind of punishment, and this is going to be motivating, of course, as well, but it's not going to be as motivating as your ideal self. So you do want to you manage your child's feared self and not feed too much to their fear self, meaning not always just telling them, okay, if you don't do this bad thing is going to happen, right? Then that's going to cultivate a child who is always afraid and who always anxious. So of course, that's not what we want to do. So my question to you all is, if you could please put in the chat, what is your child's current ideal self? So if you had to think about it, right, what would be your child's current vision of their ideal self? If you could put that in the chat. Or unmute yourselves and share. And maybe, you may not know, or you may not have thought about what is that ideal self that your child or children already have. So that's also possible, right? So I'm just going to look at the chat here. Give me 1 second. Where the wild things are. Okay, so that's the ideal self, Kitty. Okay, tough question. I don't see a lot of answers, so I'll move on. But think about that. Think about that question. Become a Paw Patrol puppy. Oh, yeah. Think about that question, right? What is your child's ideal self right now, and is that a healthy ideal self? Is that a motivating ideal self? And then the next question I would ask you, and I would invite you to put in the chat if you can think of it, is what is your wish for your child's ideal self? Minecraft expert builder. Wow, that's a great ideal self, but maybe a bit narrow, right? Because there are other domains as well. So there may be different domains of one's ideal self. a world-class gymnast, very, very nice. And they're going to, Rita, if your child is working towards becoming a world-class gymnast, your child is going to learn so much about discipline, about perseverance, about grit, right? So maybe within this specific domain, they're going to gain so much towards that. Yeah. And then once you've thought of what is your wish for your child's ideal self, you can think about role models, because this is the best way to help your child cultivate that ideal self, is by introducing them to role models. They could be virtual, they could be from texts. Um, uh, and that's really the best way in which to uh, uh, help your child cultivate their best ideal self. Okay, and then another is there are different exercises for imagining one's future selves. We don't have time for that today, so if you're interested in that, please write me, and I can share with you those exercises. But they're basically about helping your child think about what they want to be one day, kind of like setting goals, but a little bit more complex to help them imagine those future selves. So I've drawn up, or I should say, my colleague Phil has helped me draw up this little photo of how you can think about cultivating your child's ideal self. I think at the foundation and most important, like what is most nourishing for your child, not just their ideal self, but generally, is your relationship with your child. It's your relationship with your child. So before you do anything, before you worry about anything, please make sure you build that strong, healthy, trusting, loving, kind relationship with your child. That is the most important foundation of your child's motivation, right? It's going to be that relationship with you. You want to get to the point where they want to do something because of you, right? Because of your wish for them, or your motivation, or your approval of them. So that's one way in which you can get them there, is to, in a way, internalize your wish for them, right? And but in order for you to have that kind of influence, you need to have a really, really healthy relationship with your child. So I would say that's the number one most important foundation. And then there's encouragement, right? So we say, catch your child doing something right. So as much as possible, be on the lookout for things that your child is doing right, or your children are doing right. And as much as possible, call them out. We call this positive narration, right? Narrate what they're doing right, narrate what you want them to be doing right. So as much as possible, avoid saying, oh, don't do this. Instead, say, do this. So instead of saying, oh, um, don't stand up, please sit down for dinner. So instead of saying don't stand up, say instead sit down. So you want to narrate what you want them to do, and you want to narrate the positive behaviors that you're seeing. And we call this kind of like an encouragement bank account, right? So every positive speech is a deposit from you. Every praise every encouragement is a deposit to this bank account. And every redirection, or every negative feedback is a withdrawal. And you want that bank account to be as rich as possible. So you want to make more encouragement than redirection, if possible. And then, another way in which you can cultivate their ideal self is through goal setting, as I said, those vision setting exercises, and showing them role models. Another very, very important factor in determining your child's motivation is their belief that they can do it. So this is called self-efficacy beliefs. If your child does not think that he or she can do it, they would not be motivated, right? If I do not think I can play badminton, I would not be motivated to play. If I do not have a growth mindset where I think I can get better with more effort, then I wouldn't invest the time or the effort to get there, right? To improve. So you want to invest your child in thinking that they can do it, that they can improve with effort. So one way in which you can do that is to always be very optimistic with them and to help praise effort rather than achievement. And just always make sure they feel like they can do it. Otherwise, I think you can understand they would not be motivated, right? Okay, then there's the self-determination theory, which says that there are three prerequisites, if you will, for motivation. They are perceived autonomy, perceived competence, and perceived relatedness. So we've already talked about perceived competence, which is I can do it and is related to a self-efficacy belief. We've already talked about perceived relatedness, which is your relationship with your child's relationship with her teachers, your child's relationship with his friends. So that's perceived relatedness. Perceived autonomy is something we haven't talked about yet. And that is your child's feeling that they have freedom, they have agency to choose what they want to do, right? So this is you giving your child choice as much as possible. Of course, curated choices. So it's not just do whatever you want, whenever you want, but curated, healthy choices, but giving them choice, making them feel like they have some sort of autonomy, right? Because we're not very motivated. Even if you're thinking about the world of work, as an employee, you wouldn't be very motivated if your boss is micromanaging you and always telling you, oh, do this, then do that, right? Same for your child. Same for your child. Your child would not be very motivated if all day they hear from teachers, they hear from parents, do this, don't do that. Instead, they will be much more motivated, like we would as workers or professionals, if we feel like we have agency, right? Oh, I know what I'm doing, that self-efficacy belief, and I have the freedom to do what I know I need to do in order to reach certain targets, or to realize some sort of ideal self. When you have that autonomy, it's really, really motivating. So that's self-determination, that autonomy, competence, relatedness. And with the self-determination theory, there are 7 kinds of motivation. I will not get into all of these, but I just want to share with you, okay, everyone knows about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, but did you know there are different kinds of extrinsic motivation? So within the self-determination theory, they categorize different kinds of extrinsic motivation, and they are on a spectrum of internalization, meaning that you've internalized these extrinsic reasons for doing something. So for example, integration is the highest form of extrinsic motivation, and it's really, really close to intrinsic motivation. And you can get your child from integrated extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation by cultivating the ideal self. What does integration mean? It means that your child has integrated what you've told them are the very good reasons they should do something. They've integrated the value induction, right? They've married their ideal self with your ought to self. So meaning what you tell them they ought to be and who they really think they want to be, the ideal self. So that's that's the beauty or the optimal version of one's ideal self. It's when it's merged with one's ought to self, because we're always told what we ought to be, right? So it's not realistic to say that we have no ought to self. But when there's a healthy marriage of one's ideal self and one's ought to self, that's the integrated extrinsic motivation, right? Because we're motivated to do what our parents tell us we ought to do. So that's where the value induction is really powerful. Okay, many parents ask us, how can I get my kid to read more? So I want to dedicate a slide to motivating children to read more. First, it's really creating a routine for reading. So having a time and place. So may I ask you, you could throw it in the chat, do you already have a routine for reading at home? Yeah. Can you put in the chat yes or no? Yeah. Yes, but hard to follow. Jeffrey, why is it hard to follow? I'd be curious. Okay, no. Okay, so for the most parents are saying yes. That means you've already done the first step, which is creating a routine for reading, right? Having a time and a place. This is, for example, a reading corner at our school, and our kids know, when it's time to read. This is where they go. They have the autonomy. They have the choice to choose where they sit. They have the choice to choose what books they read. So they have a lot of autonomy. We don't say, sit at this desk, read this book, right? We say it's reading time and you can go ahead and pick any book you want. Of course, there are times when teachers are, encouraging them to read specific books for different reasons. Maybe pushing them to read something a little bit more difficult, or reeling them back to reading something that's more appropriate for their level. Okay, Jeffrey, if there's so many distractions going on, then as a parent, you can design the time and space so that there are fewer distractions. That would be my suggestion. And then secondly is you modeling reading. So reading along with your child. It's not very motivating for a child if a parent says, go read, and then the parent is watching TV or playing on our phones, right? That's the child want to watch TV or play on their devices too. So, as much as possible, if you have the time and the capacity to be reading along with your child, you don't have to read the same book, right? But it's like family reading time, and we all read. Let's say it's after dinner, and we all read for at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We may be reading different books, or we could be reading together the same book, but you know, we're all reading together. We're all in this together. That's very motivating for your child. They want to do what you're doing. We say that kids don't always do what we say, but they will always do what we do. So when you model, it's very powerful. And creating that family reading time, and then not just to read and then that's it, but at the end of the family reading time, you can have a little book discussion, each share what you read, what excited you about the text, making connections between texts, making connections between text and world or text itself. And then just emphasizing once again, allowing your child choice. So don't say you have to read this book or that book, but giving them choice, a curated choice, as I said. And if there are if you want to move your child away from something, then entice them with more exciting choices, right? That's what I would say for redirecting them towards some other curated choices that you want to give them. And cultivate your child's interest. So one parent told me, my child is really excited about dinosaurs. Is it okay that I let him read everything about dinosaurs? Yes, it's okay. Your child may one day become the world expert on dinosaurs. Um, so it's okay to let them pursue the interests, but at the same time balance that and nudge them to read other texts at the same time. So alternating and balancing the topics so that they get that diversity, right? So it's not just reading about dinosaurs, but it's not stopping them from reading about dinosaurs, allowing them to pursue their interests while introducing other topics, other interests as well. Okay, please let me pause here and say throw as many questions as you have as I go along. So don't hesitate to ask questions. I've shared a lot about insights from research. Let me now share some insights from the classroom and from teachers' perspectives. And you know, I, I will invite you to think about how many of these things that I'm going to list are intrinsic and how many are extrinsic motivations, right? So how many are intrinsic and how many are extrinsic? So please think about that. But when I ask teachers, what are students' motivations? What would motivate students? This is what teachers say. One, incentives, gaining awards. In kindergarten, in lower grades, primary grades, it could be as simple as getting a sticker, right? Or getting like a stamp. When I taught fifth grade in Los Angeles, it's remarkable what a child will do for a sticker or a stamp, right? Okay, I think it's clear that this is very, very, very extrinsic and it's motivating, but it's short term motivation. So some parents ask me, how do I get my kid to do something that she doesn't want to do, right? How do I get my kid to work on something that she finds boring or difficult? Use these stickers, use these stamps. This is the time when you need to get them through a hump. It's time to use these extrinsic incentives. It's okay. As long as you're balancing that out with some cultivation of their ideal self, their intrinsic motivation, right? Avoiding punishment, also very motivating. You know, kids don't want to be punished. So I think also obviously extrinsic, right? I had a kid who always misbehaved, and the best motivator for him was me saying to him, if you don't get your act together, I'm going to be calling your mother. Immediately after I say this, I'm saying this in a very calm tone, but as soon as I say this, he gets his act together, right? So know what would motivate your kid, what specific punishments would motivate your kid, um, if you need to use this kind of motivation, right? But we use these sparingly. This is power assertion to the max, right? And again, it doesn't mean you can't use power assertion, but we limit it to only when we really, really need it. Winning a competition, kids love this. So this is another way in which you can get your kid to do something that they don't want to do, which is to gamify it, right? Turn it into a competition. It could be a competition with themselves. It doesn't have to be a competition with others. You know, when I taught math, for example, I would get my kids to beat the best score. So in 1 minute, do as many, of these simple multiplication, addition, subtraction, division problems as much as possible, right? And they go from easy to hard. And it's amazing when you go, this is the warm up that we would do every day. And my kids, they go at it, they go crazy over this 1 minute, and it's not beating others, it's beat your best score. So this is one way in which you can make it very, very motivating. Task completions. Some kids are, you know, they just feel so satisfied to finish something. So that could be very motivating as well. Peer approval. The older they are, the more they care about their peers. So especially in their teenage years, this is so important. So please curate who their peers are. So you can do that as a parent, right? You can introduce them to peers that you think would be healthy for them to be surrounded by, because the older they get, the less they care about what we think and the more they care about what their friends think. Praise, really, really motivating for kids. And as I said, it's that bank account, right? Please deposit as many praises, as much encouragement as you can, but make sure they are true. So don't praise kids for things that are not true. So make sure that your praises are always specific and always true, because kids will see through it when you are bluffing them, when you are lying to them. But as much as possible, keep that bank account rich. Real life applications. Kids, the older that they get, the more they care that this is real life. But even for younger kids, even for pre-nursery kids, expose them to real life photos. So instead of cartoons, which they love, it's okay. But if they are reading, have books with real photos as much as possible. The older they get, for our secondary students, for example, we are getting them to build software with Notion, which is something that professionals do. We are getting them to edit videos with, the best Mac software out there. So you make it as real as possible, and then it's very, very motivating for them, because then they will feel like I am an adult. The older they get, the more they want to feel like they are an adult. So the more they see the real life application, the more motivating it is for them. Lastly, kids are sometimes just especially the young ones, right? The less jaded they are, they're very motivated to just learn something new, something cool, something fun. So as a parent, you can motivate them by you getting excited and you modeling this excitement for learning something new, something cool, and exposing them to these new, cool, fun ideas, topics, or subjects, or activities. So, okay, with that list, may I invite you to say which of these are intrinsic? Which of these are actually an intrinsic motivation? And you can put it in the chat. Yeah. Okay, Kitty says the last two. The last three, Rita says. Maybe task completion too. Yeah. Okay. I invite other parents to continue to put in the chat what you think, but let me give you the answer. The real answer, because the bar for intrinsic motivation is very, very high, the real answer is only the last one, only that excitement for learning itself, only that is truly intrinsic. Only that is truly intrinsic. But remember, at that self-determination spectrum, there are many ways in which one can be extrinsically motivated. Some are more internalized, and that's ideal, and others are more externalized, meaning we will only do it because of that external reason, right? Whereas for internalized extrinsic motivation, you might do it even when that extrinsic reason is not there. So the first two are as extrinsic as it gets, right? And then task completion is closer, is probably more like an internalized extrinsic motivation, but it's still extrinsic, right? Because it's something outside of you. Peer approval and praise, definitely extrinsic, right? Because you're doing it for that approval. You're not doing it just because you want to do it. But yeah, there's a way in which you can manipulate that praise so that you induct certain values and you get them close to the ideal self that you want to build for them. And they will internalize this, right? What about desire to please parents? That's the praise. That's the parental approval. Yeah, that's still extrinsic. They're doing it because of you, right? And that can be healthy if what you want them to do is healthy, but that could also be unhealthy if parents are putting a lot of pressure on their kids, which I've seen. That and then they withdraw love, right? Parents, I have seen this myself. Parents withdrawing love, not giving their approval when the kid is not meeting a certain ideal that the parent has set. So that's where you have to be really, really clear-minded, and you have to make sure that your version of their ideal self is a healthy one. All right. Sorry, I'll take. I would get off my soapbox and continue. I just want to show you through this how high the bar is for intrinsic motivation. All right, some of you have sent in questions before the talk, so I'm gonna now answer some of your questions. I invite you to continue to put yours in the chat if you have any. There are three questions that were very related. One, how to ensure sustainable self-motivation. Two, how can kids be sustainably motivated? And three, how to teach children to stay focused on learning. So these three questions are from three different parents, but they're all about basically how to sustain motivation, which is really smart because many people just think about getting kids motivated, but sustaining the motivation over years is more important actually. Because it's easy to get them motivated with extrinsic rewards or punishment, but sustaining that motivation, that's the hard part. So here are a few tips for sustaining their motivation. One, Help your child find genuine interests through intimate and honest one-on-one conversations, because you want to uh, uh, you know cultivate their genuine interests, not just impose interests on them. Some parents dream of their girls becoming ballet dancers, or dream of their boys becoming wrestling champions, right? Those are your interests for them. um, but is that what they want to do, right? And some parents think they're too young to know what they want to do. Okay, fair. But the way to get them to their genuine interest is to actually expose them to many different kinds of activities, many different kinds of texts and topics, and then seeing through these intimate and honest conversations what their genuine interest is. The reason for this is, unless it's a real interest from your child, it's going to be very hard for them to sustain. So it's going to be a lot easier for them to sustain that motivation over a decade or a lifetime if it's something that they are truly interested in. I keep been talking about badminton a lot, but I love badminton. Like when I play badminton, I feel like I'm on cloud nine and there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. So because of that genuine love for that sport, I want to do it forever, right? I want to do it until I can't anymore. So that's what you want to find for your child, and that's what's going to sustain their motivation. Second is, once you've identified those interests, help them set these long-term goals, right? Help them create this ideal self, because with goal setting theory, which is a lot of research on how to set goals, and the power of goal setting, um, you want to help your child set these goals, but then these long-term goals, but then also set regular and measurable milestones along the way that you can check in with and help them reflect. Are we on our way? Are we on track? Right? Help them build this habit of reflection, help them build this habit of checking against the goal. That's how they'll learn to adjust what they need to do. Oh, I need to do a lot more if I'm going to really be back on track, right? Or, wow, I'm doing really well and I just need to keep going and keep at it. So and it's okay to have really big goals. It's okay to say to your child, I want you, or not you say to your child, it shouldn't be that. It should be your child wanting to go to a dream school like Stanford or Oxford, right? That's okay if that is coming from them. Um, and then if you're gonna if that is the true interest, then after you set that long-term goal, help them cultivate this ideal self that is committed to that learning or the activity, and use role models and use modeling, you modeling that with them, right? You showing your commitment to certain activities or topics over a long time. Now, the role models is so important. um, Renee is in the room. Renee and I, we both coach students, very few, but we do coach a few students every year for college admissions. And we both have students who want to go to, the Ivy League or Oxbridge. I have a student now whose dream school is Stanford. That's fine if that is what their dream school is, again. Um, but the way that I help my students understand what it takes is by showing them role models, by showing them applications of kids who have gotten into these really tough schools. Um, and once they see the applications from these successful applications, they understand what it takes, and then they are naturally motivated. They're like, then they will scramble to do what they need to do to get there, right? Then they understand. I just did this exercise with a student where I said, where I showed the student the successful applications, and the student sees himself that, okay, with a 39 on the IB, I am not a competitive candidate for the Ivy League. So the student then, with me, set goals for, okay, from now until when you have to apply, how can we move us from 39 to closer to 45, as close as possible, right? So we talk about specific classes. And when do you think you can get this 5 to a 6? When do you think you can get the 6 to a 7? What do you need to do to get there? All right. And we talked about the extended essay and how he needs an A on the extended essay, and he doesn't have a coach for the extended essay, and then now we're gonna get him a coach for the extended. Um, um, so it's yeah, it's about setting these goals. It's about being really realistic about what it takes to get there, and they will be naturally motivated if this is their genuine interest, if this is their genuine goal, and they'll be naturally motivated if they see what see role models and what it took the role models to get there. I hope this is making sense. Okay. Um, and then creating routines for sustained engagement in learning or in the activity. So this is really, really important. Kids, no matter how old they are, even adults, we need routines. So structure the time, the place, and for their sustained engagement. Um, okay. Other questions that you've asked me. In Hong Kong, is the motivations of parents more of an issue than the motivation of the child? Discuss. So I'm not going to touch this too much because I think you all understand the pressure that many parents put on kids, and there's healthy pressure and then there's unhealthy pressure. So as much as possible for us as parents to be clear-minded about how much pressure can your child really take, and it's different depending on the kid, and and what is it that your kid really want. Is it aligned their ideal self and your version of their ought to self. um yeah, that's all I'll say on that. How to deal with kids who throw a screaming tantrum. Okay, of course we all um, struggle with this as parents, especially parents of younger children. It's unavoidable that you will have some screaming tantrums along the way. I would suggest that, as much as possible, you being calm. So you want to be the opposite of where they are. You want to be where you want them to be. So if they're screaming and you want them to be calm, you are calm. You are calm. You know, you're not affected. You're not moved by their screaming. And just by you being calm, they will naturally calm down, and redirect them with really clear instructions of what you want them to be doing. Um, that is once they are in already the tantrum. Ideally, you're identifying the triggers for the tantrum and then working on those triggers, right? Different kids have different triggers for their tantrum. So please be really clear-minded about what are those triggers, and then work on making sure that you remove those triggers somehow. Uh, and if I have more specific information about this child, I can share more about how we could resolve those triggers. Practical kids tips on motivating a child to do something they don't find fun or interesting. So I already touched on this, and this is where I suggested, to use those extrinsic motivators at first, the stickers, the stamps, the competition, beating your best score, your own best score. So sometimes to get through those difficult humps, those difficult tasks, let's say it's learning Chinese and you just need to do character practice, um, it's about giving them those extrinsic motivators to get them through that, and then slowly build um, their ideal self where they can do that. They where you've had conversations with them and you've told them that there are times in life where you just have to do it, even if you don't like it, even if you don't want to, you just have to do it, and it's a skill you need for life, right? Did I want to stand 4 hours in a line at the DMV in Los Angeles to renew my license? No, but I just had to do it, right? So I think using those adult examples will also help your child, and and then showing them role models, right, of people who have just stuck it out, who have had grit, um, And then like that's where you build the ideal self, a very healthy and motivating one, that where they can get through these tough times, these tough tasks, or unmotivating tasks. All right, and then there was a question about our school, Bloom. What curriculum are you using for secondary? That is about to open. So primary is opening this September, and then secondary will open in 2 years time. And will students take DSE, IB, or something else? So secondary, we're doing A levels, which is the UK system, and AP, advanced placement, which is the US system. So we're not doing IB, we're not doing DSE, but A levels and AP. But of course, with those two, they can go on and plug into any system, tertiary system in the world. Okay, realistically, at what age could children develop intrinsic motivation? That's a question from DH. I'm sorry, I don't know your name there. Um, Actually, the research shows that there isn't, there isn't a limit, right? But of course, I mean, there isn't a minimum age for intrinsic motivation, and some people are born with stronger intrinsic motivation than others. So that is also true. But every kid can be cultivated. Every kid's intrinsic motivation can be cultivated. I would say that you can work actively to cultivate, their intrinsic motivation from as young as 3, if not younger, right? And through modeling certain behaviors yourself, and through showing them those role models, and through value induction, that's how you can build their intrinsic motivation. Curious on the topic, does project-based learning require teachers more time to prepare and facilitate? How do we track individual learning progress if they were given different levels of learning tasks? So this is a bit unrelated to the topic of today, but um, but I'm very happy to speak very briefly on it. Project-based learning does take a lot of time to plan. Definitely, it takes time for teachers to create, design the projects, and then get all the materials and think through how to facilitate it. Definitely takes a lot of our teachers' time. We build in planning time for teachers, of course. How to track individual learning? We have what's called individual learner portfolios or profiles. So that's how we will be tracking their projects and their progress. But we also use different standardized assessments, not tests, but assessments that we do on a regular basis to make sure that they are meeting learning targets, and that they're on track. Lastly, how to motivate a child during online learning. Okay, I know that online learning has been a nightmare and a pain in the neck for a lot of parents. So let me just share with you a few things that we're doing at Bloom. So our online pedagogical commitment. Even with online learning, we are retaining our interactive project-based model of learning focused on student production. So you can see some screenshots here, students creating stuff and using manipulatives from a very young age, even. And then offering quality personalized feedback synchronously and asynchronously, because that's, with small group learning, that's very, very important. And then continuing to use manipulatives and other learning tools and giving kids stretch breaks. So those are all things that we're doing. What can you do at home? First of all, have your child's camera on as much as possible. For it really helps the teachers to see your child, because we can motivate them better if we can see them. If we can't see them, it's really, really hard for us to know whether they're paying attention, how they're doing. So please help us by having your kid turn on their camera. Uh, Another thing that we're doing is smaller chunks. So keeping learning as short as is developmentally appropriate, or as long as developmentally appropriate. So you also think that about that for your child. Uh, how much screen time are they having, and managing that amount of screen time and giving them long breaks between the screen time. We are teaching with a faster pace as well, so that we're motivating them through our own energy. And for you at home, please, that routine, once again, giving your child a dedicated quiet space for learning, and then having them dress for class. So not rolling to the online class in their pajamas, right? But dressing for class and being professional, teaching them, and you modeling for them that professionalism, um, and then getting involved yourself when possible. I understand we many of us have to work, so this may not be possible. But when it's possible for you to be involved, it could even be at home later on in the day, asking them how was your class and really probing them for what they learn and such. Um, Now let me pause there. And if you have any other questions, please do throw them in the chat. And then I'm going to move on to what we are doing at Bloom to keep kids motivated. Very, very short section. One way in which we are keeping our students motivated is orienting them towards the future, right? Getting them ready for but not what what jobs there were last century, what jobs there are today, but what jobs there will be in the future. And our kids and adults get naturally very excited and very motivated thinking about the future. um, and we want our kids to be to be bilingual and multicultural, and to be able to work together and to create things. And that's the innovative part. That's the innovation part. So, uh, you know, the growth mindset as part of our well-being and character education, that's really important. Helping our kids build that self-efficacy belief, thinking that they can do it, thinking that they can get better with effort. So these are a few things that we're doing. And then coding without screens, right? Teaching kids chess, and through chess, helping them understand pattern recognition, for example. Kids get really excited to do this. I have seen our kids, when I put out the chess sets, they're naturally drawn to it, and they want to know how to play, even for those who don't know how to play. And then when we have older kids playing, those are the role models. The younger kids naturally, want to learn. So that's very motivating. Meaningful math without memorization. So not just doing the drill and kill, which is sometimes important, but also teaching them the meaning of math. So for example, with the planets, not just building a model like one would typically do, but actually building them to scale and showing them real life photos, or mock-ups of the planets, and then having them recreate that, right, at a professional level. And projects, we've already talked about this, having them explore, having them play and generate ideas and find their interests, and then create, getting their hands dirty, and then having the chance to share. That's very motivating. And then making sure always having them to reflect on how they're doing. Weekly field trips, how fun is that? Getting them out into the community, using the city as our campus. So that's, I mean, many parents tell me that, if they were a kid, they wish they would have had chances like this, to really see the connection between what they're learning in the classroom and what the real world is. So that's a little bit about us. To wrap up the topic, our Bloom Primary is opening this fall, and I know there are parents on this chat who are already enrolled, who have already enrolled their kids at our primary school. So welcome to you all. Rita in particular, who logged on very early. So happy to have this chance to share with you sort of the research, and what we're doing in the classroom on, and then how all that relates to motivation. And for those who are not yet enrolled but may be interested, we have an info session this Saturday at 3. So you're all invited. And for those who have already enrolled your kids, please share this information with your friends. Think about who you want your kids peers to be, and you can help us build this community by helping us curate who those peers are, and inviting your friends who you think would be interested in a school like ours. Okay, and that is it. I've spoken for an hour now, so thank you for staying on and listening. If you have any other questions, please do throw them in the chat. And Renee, if you have anything you'd like to say, you're also most welcome to unmute.
Hi, I'm not sure. I can't see myself right now,
We
but
can see you.
you can see me. Okay, great. No, thanks so much, man. That was wonderful. And as a parent, I learned a few things too. I think I'm an educator too. I read the research, and a lot of times I forget these things when I'm talking to my own children or sometimes even my students. And I do think it's very relevant that there are different strategies that we use in different contexts. At home, in the classroom, online, and at different stages in life. And one thing we're trying to do at Bloom is to look at that research, make sure that the teachers teaching the appropriate age levels are aware of what strategies are most appropriate. And I think, I don't know if you've already mentioned this, but there's a great book on motivation called Drive by Professor Daniel H. Pink. And in that book, he talks a lot about how there are different a lot of things that we think about motivation aren't really true. And one of the things, though, that actually are essential for motivation is purpose and the yearning to do something that is larger than ourselves. And I think that that has something to do with our mission, that desire to cultivate people who want to lead lives of purpose. And yeah, so that's all I have to say. And I'm sure there are other people who have questions, so I'll turn it over back to them. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Min.
Ren. Yeah, thank you, Renee. I saw your message and figure I invite you to share it instead of me talking about it. Another book that I would recommend, I'm not sure if you can see my video, is Carol Dweck's Mindset. Oh, I think I had to put it closer to me. Yep. Mindset. And this is a really talking about that growth mindset that I was referencing earlier. And if this book is not only good for kids, but for parents to think about what kind of mindsets you want to develop in cultivate in your children, but also good for adults, because Carol also talks about the workplace and mindsets that are useful there, not just parenting. Yeah, this is another book. Okay, so I don't see any other questions, so I will leave it there. And thank you all for logging in for this inaugural lunch talk. Please do contact us, message. Oh, I had a final slide. I forgot. Um, of takeaways. So let me just go through these really quickly. Excuse me. Just this is just to summarize everything that I've talked about already. Thinking about that foundation being your relationship with your child, building that trust and allowing for that open, honest communication, challenging your child just enough because they're motivated when they're challenged, but not putting, undue pressure on them, helping your child to create healthy and motivating ideal selves, um, setting goals and reflecting constantly on progress towards goals, building those habits from a very, very young age is very, very good. And creating those routines for sustained learning and engagement. So those are the takeaways. I've put my email here, min@bnb.edu.hk. So if you have any more questions or if you like to share something or a challenge, happy to hear from you. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll do another talk soon. And so stay tuned, and we'll share with you when we have those organized. And I hope to see some of you this Saturday for our info session at 3. Cheers.